Let's talk about paper. Maraming nagtatanong sa akin kung ano ba yung medium na maganda gamitin para sa pencils or para sa charcoal or para sa watercolor. But ang nakakalimutan natin is ano ba yung tamang papel na gamitin for the certain medium. Importante ang papel dahil ito yung magiging vessel mo for your artwork. Marami sa atin nang hindi masyadong nag-invest on paper dahil mas nag-invest tayo sa medium. Pero wag natin kakalimutan na ito yung sasalo sa medium natin. So dapat mag-invest din tayo sa tamang papel. What are the things that we need to look out for? First, GSM. I'm sure nakikita nyo to sa lahat ng papel na binibili nyo. It just means the weight of the paper. Dito na nakadepende kung gaano siya kanipis or kung gaano siya kakapal. Of course, we have to determine the medium. And usually kapag bumibili naman tayo ng papel, nakasaad naman doon kung para saang medium siya nakadesignate. There are so many types of paper out there. And yung madalas naman natin talagang gamitin is yung white paper. Kasi yun din naman ang widely available. Pero meron ding iba-ibang paper na pwedeng gamitin. So pwede tayong gumamit ng tone paper tulad nito. Merong tone paper na gray. Pag tone paper, ibig sabihin you're using the paper as your middle tone. So yung dadagdag mo na lang ay shadows and highlights. If you're using graphite or charcoal, you'll use the graphite as your shadow, and then you'll use like a white graphite or white colored pencils or white charcoal for the highlights. May iba-ibang binding ang sketch pads or sketchbooks. May ring bind, may soft bound, may hard bound. And it's up to you kung ano yung gusto mong gamitin. Maybe depende kung saan mo siya gagamitin or kung paano mo siya gagamitin. Katulad ng hardbound, okay siya if you travel kasi prone siya to, let's say, mabasa or malaglag or something like that. So at least it's good to have like a hardbound sketchbook na pwede mong madala outside without ever worrying kung anong pwedeng mangyari sa artworks mo. Kahit na malaglag siya, like for example, ito, ilang beses na siya nalaglag, but at least, you know, kung may konting dents, it's okay. At least, protektado pa rin naman yung artworks mo sa loob. And kung mabasa man siya, since waterproof naman yung cover, then it's fine. There are so many different types of paper. Even under just one brand, maraming types of paper. For example, Strathmore. This brand has a certain meter of sorts in terms of quality. So, meron silang series na tinatawag. So, meron silang 100 up to 500 series. So, 100 being the lowest quality and also the cheapest. And the 500 is the highest and also the more or the most expensive ones. So kung pipili tayo ng paper, of course we wanted the best quality. Lalo-lalo na if you do art professionally. You want to invest on paper because ito yung vessel mo for your artwork. So, if you're gonna do a commission, then I suggest that you go for the high quality paper. For heavyweight drawing, you can use this for, of course, for sketching as well, but you can also use this for colored pencils. Especially kapag nagbe-blend ka using colored pencils, because colored pencils create intense pressure on the paper, lalo na kapag nagbe-blend. So you want a paper that would take that pressure and not deteriorate on you. So okay na okay kapag makapal yung paper and high quality. You can also use something like this, a Bristol paper. So ito naman mas glossy. May pagka-glossy yung surface niya. But it's thick as well. But again, depende sa GSM na hinahanap mo or makukuha mo. Kasi there are levels of GSM or levels of paper weights. And for example, this Bristol is great on taking on markers and inks. But not necessarily na hindi siya magbi-bleed, because kahit na makapal na yung paper, it will still bleed, especially when you use markers as I use them, na very saturated yung paper. So kapag ganon, then para lang maiwasan na mag-bleed siya sa susunod na paper, then lagyan nyo na lang ng papel sa ilalim. There are also types of papers like this one. Meron tayong cardstock, meron tayong craft paper, meron tayong black paper, meron tayong vellum paper. So these papers are also good for sketching. Kahit ito na cardstock na color black, you can still use like white colored pencils or white charcoal to create your sketches. It's also a good practice for your highlighting skills or shading skills. Craft paper is also like what I discussed earlier, na it's the same as the toned paper. You can use this for highlights and shadows, and the color of the paper is your middle tone. This particular paper is smooth. It has a smooth surface, pero kung nakikita nyo, may mga lines din siya on the paper. That is also a texture on the paper. So when you use pencil on this, lalabas yung texture na yon. You can also use that craft paper with ink, so you can use it for calligraphy and ball pens and so on. Of course, this one is a black paper. This is a thick paper. I think this is 300 GSM. I used colored pencils on that certain artwork, and this is very thick paper. It's a very substantial paper. You can use gouache on this one, or you can use acrylics, but not so much on the water side because it won't absorb water. You can use dry paint or dry painting on this one. And this one is vellum. This one has a glossy side, just like the Bristol that I showed you a while ago. And I used this one in the previous video that I uploaded when I tested out the colored pencils. Usually, the paper that we use for graphite is actually good for charcoal as well. Brands like Strathmore created this paper specifically for charcoal. This is a textured paper. Kung nakikita nyo, may mga lines siya na across the paper. So when you render your charcoal on it, lalabas din yung texture niya. This is not white paper. This is actually a bit grayish. So medyo mid-tone na siya. And just like what I discussed earlier, when you use a mid-tone paper or toned paper, then the color of the paper is your middle tone, and it's up to you now to use the charcoal for your shadows and highlights, since meron din naman na white charcoal. So this is a good practice for whoever is using charcoal as their choice of medium. Kung wala naman kayong mahanap na specifically for charcoal or medyo mahal yung Strathmore, then you can totally use something like this. This is paper that is used for soft pastels. Ang tawag namin sa kanya ay Canson paper simply because it's the brand. Pero meron talaga siyang pangalan. Hindi lang namin siya ginagamit. More on calling it just the Canson paper. So, the texture of this paper is what you call honeycomb surface. So, hindi siya lines like the charcoal texture. This is more of a dots pattern. So, hindi lang siya masyadong makita dito sa camera, but basically, if you render your soft pastels or your charcoal, ang magre-register dyan is the honeycomb texture, which you can actually see on this cover. This is also a Strathmore 400 series. This is a pastel paper. And if you are willing to invest on a better quality paper, then why not? Then get that Strathmore 400 or 500 series and experience the difference between the cheaper quality versus the best quality that you can acquire. And it's fine. You can use a cheaper paper for practice, and then when you want or when you have commissions, then you can use the best quality paper that you have. This is a more substantial paper compared to, let's say, your paper for a sketchbook or your charcoal paper. Definitely thicker. Since soft pastel and charcoal are very dusty, kasi soft nga sila, di ba? Mas nakakatulong yung textured paper to hold those particles. What is also great with pastel paper is that you get a variety of colors. Most are in neutral tones. So when you use your pastel colors, basically you use the paper as your mid-tone, and you use your darker colors and lighter colors to create your shades and shadows and highlights. Meron siyang gray tones, meron siyang bluish tones, meron siyang skin tones as well. So, maraming pagpipilian, which is great. Now, let's move on to watercolor paper. Pagdating sa pagpili ng watercolor paper, there are certain grades that we need to look at. So we need to look at GSM, we need to look at if it's acid-free, we need to look at if it's 100% cotton. I have a watercolor paper here, which is by Awagami Factory, and this is not 100% cotton. Instead, this is a 70% bamboo and recycled washi. And later on, I will discuss how it goes. For this one, this is a 55% cotton and 45% kozo. Why am I highlighting cotton, or why is cotton very important in terms of watercolor paper? Yung cotton kasi, maganda yung absorption niya ng water. At the same time, pag nalagyan siya ng water, hindi siya mag-absorb agad. So, meron kang enough time to render your watercolor without worrying na ma-absorb yung color mo kaagad. So, aside from having 100% cotton quality, meron ding cellulose na tinatawag. Yung cellulose usually, ginagamit yon sa mga student grade paper. So, ito yung mga lower quality paper. Lower quality siya din kasi hindi siya nag-absorb ng water and pigment as well as kung paano mag-absorb ng water and pigment ang cotton. Dahil dun kasi, makaka-affect kasi yon sa output ng final artwork mo. And although ang advantage na is mura siya. If you notice something like this is what we call a watercolor paper block. So, ibig sabihin nun, glued lahat ng sides ng pad. And what you need is a leaf blade. Well, that's what I have. It's a leaf blade or a letter opener. Para matanggal yung bawat leaf or bawat paper from the block, like what I am doing here right now. So, don't use cutter kasi kapag gumamit ka ng cutter, mas malaki ang chance na masisira yung papel and masasayang yung paper nyo. Aside from the watercolor blocks, nauuso na rin ngayon yung mga sketchbook type of watercolor paper. Kasi marami na rin artists ang parang gumagawa lang ng mga journal type of art or art journaling, parang ganun. So, nakaipon lang lahat ng ideas and creative outputs in one sketchbook type. I like this one na yung regular pad na it's bound to be taken off. And this one is Hanne Mule. This is a German brand. And this is a 300 GSM, 140 pounds. This is cold press, I believe. And this is acid-free. Now, take note, acid-free. You need papers that are acid-free. Why? Because if it's not acid-free, maninilaw yung paper nyo eventually, which is something like this. Yan, mangyayari yan. So, always make sure that your paper is acid-free para hindi siya manilaw. So, basically, the ideal stats of your watercolor is 1, acid-free, 2, 300 GSM and above, and 3, 100% cotton. Again, why? Because if you use 100% cotton, then your paper is the best quality. And if it's cellulose, then it's a lower grade, or it's a student grade material. I'm not saying you can't use or don't use cellulose. You can use cellulose all you want. Especially when you want to practice, okay lang yun. You can do that. But it's also great that you also practice with 100% cotton so that you know the difference between the two and you know how to manipulate the medium when you use both types of paper. Another thing that you need to consider is what you're using is either hot pressed, cold pressed, or rough. You may see this on every type of watercolor pad or watercolor sheets that you encounter. Meron nakalagay doon na cold pressed, hot pressed, or rough. Usually, ang available dito sa atin ay cold pressed. I don't know why, bakit cold pressed lang, but hindi hot pressed or rough. Konti lang yung nakikita kong hot pressed na available dito sa Philippines or sa Manila. I personally want to use hot pressed simply because I do a lot of illustration type of artwork compared to a wash type of artwork. Hot pressed is great for illustrations, and hot pressed paper can absorb water immediately or faster compared to a cold pressed paper. So kapag ginagamit yung hot pressed paper, hindi ka masyadong gagamit ng maraming tubig. Kasi kapag gumamit ka ng maraming tubig, may tendency siya na mag-warp or magkakaroon ng magiging fibrous yung paper. because it doesn't have a lot of texture compared to cold press. The rough texture of watercolor paper is for bold strokes and for usually dry painting. Now, let's go back to the Awagami Factory watercolor paper that I showed you a while ago. This is the bamboo paper. So I tested this one out. This is a more fibrous version of a hot pressed paper. It absorbs quickly. When too much water is used, it releases a lot of fiber. Tsaka mas nag-warp din siya nung ginamit ko. Ito naman yung Hakuho, which is 45% kozo and 55% cotton. Mas malapit siya sa kung paano mag-behave ang hot pressed paper. Less warping din siya compared to the bamboo paper. So aside from the watercolor pads and watercolor sketchbooks, meron ding mga nabibiling watercolor sheets. Meron mga maliliit na katulad nito, or you can buy the big size and then cut it up into smaller pieces. Hindi mo kailangan bumili ng mamahaling papel kaagad, lalo-lalo na kung nagsa-start ka pa lang. So I suggest you get a good quality student grade paper. Tapos, yun yung gamitin mo for practice. Especially kung, halimbawa, student ka pa lang or ngayon ka pa lang nagsistart mag-explore using watercolor. So, meron namang mga okay na brands out there na mura naman na and at the same time, okay naman yung quality niya. So, kumbaga, mapapatawad mo na yung quality niya. Especially kung nagpa-practice ka pa lang. So, this is one brand that I recommend you to use. Okay naman siya. It's not bad. And the price is not bad either. Although it's not 300 GSM, it's 200 GSM, but it is acid-free. And meron ding isa pang brand, which is Fabriano. This is also a good brand. They come in sheets as well. Meron din atang pad version to. And Canson also has the sheets type. So, it's up to you which ones you want. Kung gusto mo ng sheets or kung gusto mo ng pad. It's up to you. And that's it for our discussion about paper. I hope this helps you find your perfect paper. And sana nasagot ko yung ibang mga tanong tungkol sa pagpili ng papel for certain mediums. And ang dami pa actually pwedeng i-tackle about paper, but I need to keep this video as short as possible. Comment down below if you want me to do a more in-depth discussion on a certain type of paper that I just discussed. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!